Well, welcome to See Hear Love. I'm your host, Melinda, and we're so glad that you've joined us today in our living room as we hear an amazing story of faith and love and incredible transformation from our special guest, Danny MacKay from Stonewall, Manitoba, whose godly disruption became a catalyst for him coming to Jesus in the most unlikely way, in the back of a stolen car. Danny is also the national ambassador for E3 Partners in Canada, the organization behind I Am Second. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And a big welcome to our godly disruptors. Do you like that kind of segue? Yeah. Cheryl, Brooke, and Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
Are we ready for this?
Ready.
I know. Are you ready, Danny, with all the
ready.
ladies on, around here? I think, first of all, we need to know, what does a godly disruption or disruptor mean? How would you define that?
I think when we think about God, it's like in his nature to disrupt. He's been doing it right from the book of Genesis. He disrupted Adam and Eve when they had fallen. He got involved right from Moses and Abraham. God was disruptive in a lot of ways, and even in the time of Jesus, he was incredibly disruptive to a lot of things of that day. And I think as he calls us to follow him, we get involved in kind of disrupting the world for the sake of the kingdom.
Wow. So what does that look like practically? Like, I love the word disruptor, but I don't know if that's the right definition, because I want to just add chaos and, party it up all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And there's definitely that in us too,
Yeah.
right? That ability to do that in a very negative way as well, which, as you know from part of my story, that was a big piece of what was going on in my life at that time.
Yeah.
When I actually hit a rock bottom and decided to run away from home, and so I stole this car. I felt completely alone. I didn't feel like anybody cared about me or loved me, and I just felt incredibly alone. So I stole this car and ran away, and in the back of that car was a book that was an outreach to teenagers.
Wow.
And so I got rid of the car. Another time, I'll tell you how I made all that right.
Okay.
But I kept the book and I read it, and for the first time I heard the gospel, I heard the good news. And so such amazing hope for moms out there who have these crazy, wild teenagers. God can change somebody and disrupt their whole life in an instant, and that's what happened to me. It was a very deep, very radical, very sincere change.
Wow. What was the truth that kind of did it for you? Because some people can read something like that and they're like, maybe.
Yeah.
I still have to investigate, but for you, it seemed pretty clear.
Yeah, I think it really genuinely for me was the love of Christ. The fact that he would leave his kingdom and step down into this earth, clothe himself, not just temporarily, but for the rest of eternity, he's clothed himself with manhood. And the fact that he would do that and lay his life down and die the way he died on that cross, for me, gave me such a feeling of worth and hope, and I was just overcome by that kind of love. So,
What about for you guys? Like, has there been a moment where you were sort of like a godly disruptor, or was there a godly disruption that happened in your life to bring you to where you're at? Cheryl, what about you?
Both.
Okay.
I'm so excited about this topic, by the way. I'm so glad Danny's here because I'm the product of someone who disrupted the darkness in my life, brought the love of God right to me on the street. And I've dedicated my entire life to working with at-risk youth. So I feel like I am called to disrupt the darkness and that agenda of darkness that is over this generation, that they would be lost, perish, and just really be self-harming and hurtful. I feel like we're called to be that light that pierces the darkness. So I really love this disrupting idea today. Yeah.
Brooke, what about you?
Yeah, I've definitely had a moment where like my life was disrupted and in the best way. But I also have a moment recently actually where I got a message from a woman who was listening to one of my songs, and it's such writing songs is quite it's special because you're putting truth in people's ears and in their mouths to say and sing. And she had written me and said, I walked away from God. I have cancer. I'm very angry at the church, very angry at God. She's like, this song brought me back to him. And I thought, oh my word, praise the Lord. Like, you have no idea the stuff you're putting out, like what it will do in people's lives.
amen.
Yeah, it's good. Lisa?
I think for me, it's absolutely true to say that God, it's consistent disrupting to the point that you kind of get used to that God is going to intervene in your life. It's an ongoing conversation. I think younger in our faith lives, often it's like Sunday, he'll disrupt you. And then on Monday to Saturday, you kind of do your own thing, but you get used to this ongoing conversation, this relationship. Yeah. And he's a living, dynamic God. That was the whole thing. Like he just came to life, it seemed, for you in that car. Yeah. And that's what he is. He's raw, he cannot be contained. And that to me is just everything what God is. He's an intervening, disrupting God because he doesn't want to leave you on those streets.
Agreed. Like, I agree. I mean, the disruptions that have happened in my life, I mean, people literally like disrupted, stopped me from doing things, called me out because they said, because we love you. Because we know that there's something better for you, Melinda. Like the club scene and running away from God and filling your life with all the things that are false, drugs and drinking and relationships and boys that were filling these deep needs, but not at all. It was more of an escapism and everything else. And so, but people kept saying, there's more, my mom and my dad, my church community. And so I'm glad for Disruptors. I'm really glad. You know, Dani, talk to us about why that's so important for all of us to be disruptors, like mom, dads, ourselves, older people, younger people, you know, within the church. Like, why is it important? How do we really engage that way?
Well, you know, I love your story about how somebody came to you as a stranger on the streets, and I just think that to follow Jesus is to be a disruptor. And you know, I think sometimes we think that, you know, sharing Jesus with other people is somebody else's job. And did you know that 98% of North American believers, on a massive survey that went out to thousands of them, 98% never share their faith with a lost person, never and rarely. And I think it's probably because we don't have a sense of identity, of being an ambassador for Christ. I think it's we don't know what to say. A lot of times we're not equipping our churches and people in a lot of ways to actually share the gospel. We can invite people to an address, to an event. We know how to do that partly, but we don't know how to invite someone to Jesus. And so, you know, just learning simple ways to initiate spiritual conversations in a normal, natural way is something that we're doing and equipping people all around the world to do that, to start sharing Jesus.
So how do you do that? That's a good starting point, because I think people get afraid because they need to know the Bible really well. They need to know all the answers, all the scriptures, and if a big theological question comes, oh shoot, what if I don't know how to answer it? And that's why people get paralyzed.
They do,
Right? What would you say? Like, how do you just be real as you share?
So the number one thing that we've seen all around the world, regardless of which culture or language or anything that you are, one of the most important things, I think, is to start with genuine relationship. Like, not just start with develop a long-term relationship, but necessarily, but, start with something simple, such as offering to pray for them. You know, when I'm sitting beside someone on the airplane and I get to talk to them, I just say, hey, is there anything I can pray for you? You know, like if God could do a miracle in your life, what would it be? You know, I love asking my servers at restaurants, when I stop in at a gas station, hey, as I'm heading out, I'm just wondering, man, is there anything I could pray for you? I just offer to pray. And I'm not joking. Everywhere around the world, people will literally just stop and take you into the depths of what they're struggling with. And it's just a great opportunity to go from there to sharing your story. It's, hey, I remember a time in my life when I was feeling that, and then to share the gospel. We use a little simple thing called the 3 circles, but.
That's awesome. What about you? Any of you, have you had these same experiences?
Yeah, I want to say that I really want to piggyback on what Dani's saying, and maybe for someone who can't even quite get there just yet, that boldness to ask for prayer. The disruptor for me that changed my life, I always say it was a hot chocolate and a donut. It was a hot chocolate and a donut and conversation for 3 months that broke down this hardened heart. And so sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, love is a disruptor in itself. Because many of us don't feel it and receive it in its purest form. And so love in its purest form can break and shake and mold and pierce. And so I encourage people to just kind of start there too as well.
That's good.
Yeah, I love what you said, Dani. That's biblical. We are ambassadors for Christ. And you know, we have a responsibility as believers and as followers of Jesus to lead people to that place. And again, it might not always be with the most theological, you know, words, but like with love, with love, and like a simple, how can I pray for you? And it can be that simple, and that can change someone's life.
And what's the worst that could happen? They say no. Like, I don't want to be prayed for, right?
That
I mean,
is
again,
actually
that's the
the
worst
worst
thing
that's
that could
ever
happen.
happened.
But that's what I'm saying.
No, thank
we,
you.
Yeah, we make it create this big thing that they're going to be so upset and they're going to yell at me in the gas station because I asked them for prayer. And like, when I've done that, I mean, I think only twice somebody said to me, no, it's okay. Okay. And as they walked away, I prayed for them. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm praying for you as you're leaving me. But that's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because at the worst, I think it's a lot to do with our own issues and insecurities about things. I think that we need to be more bold and strong in that, right?
Yeah, and when we offer to pray, one of the things I love about that is it's invitational, not confrontational.
Right.
I feel another thing I like is the ball is in their court. They get to decide how deep or how shallow that conversation stays. So it's not awkward. It can be very natural to just be a person who goes around praying for people and then sharing the gospel with them.
Yeah. Lisa?
I was just thinking that exactly, it's not confrontational, and disruption has this connotation of something that's very loud in like the definition of the English language. But what you get, it's love, it's subtle, it's gentle. It's God in the burning bush drawing Moses. It's God in the showing himself in the gentle whisper. Sometimes it's Saul on the road to Damascus, and it's huge, and it's just really life-shattering. But one of the other points that I'm picking up on is that God disrupted our lives so that we can continue to subtly, gently, lovingly, sometimes, you know, harshly, depending on the relationship, disrupt others. And it's that idea that it's going to go forth from here on.
But even in the gentleness, there needs to be a boldness.
Yeah,
I think one of the things
absolutely.
that we can encourage ourselves and the people who are watching and listening is that we must be. Like every day I look around, I think we are the answer to somebody's pain or disappointment. And you know, I had a moment when I was at a coffee shop, and I was waiting to get my tall soy extra hot no foam Tazo chai, and I was really excited about it. And there was a woman beside me sitting, and I heard God say, and it doesn't happen a lot, tell her that she is seen and that I've not forgotten her. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm waiting in this line too long, and I'm wanting this, and God was very clear. So I got out of line, much to my chagrin. Went over to her and I said, I don't know you, this might sound really crazy, but I just need to let you know that God sees you and he knows what you're going through. And she looked up at me and she broke down crying. It still gives me chills. And she's sobbing. She goes, who told you? Who told you? I'm like, honestly, it's God. And here's the thing, it wasn't for me to all of a sudden say, I'm gonna now disciple you, or it wasn't another, like I didn't have to do anything. I just put my hand on her. She goes, that's all I needed to know, to be reminded and be remembered that I matter. And she cried. And that was it. And so I think if I'd missed that opportunity, that woman would not have heard and experienced that. And so it's those kinds of things that we need to be more aware of as we go.
And it was a blessing to you.
It was. Now I had to wait back in line for my chai tea, but hey, that's minor compared to what happened. Right?
You know, it's funny. Sorry, I hear two words in that. Like, love is intentional, right? So you're not loving just sort of quietly. There's something that you're moving towards, and love takes obedience.
Yes.
That obedience. That, I mean, imagine if you didn't obey, right? So sometimes love calls us out into those uncomfortable places.
That's good. You know, Dani, you've brought a verse for us today that has helped you in leadership and in life and being a disruptor. It's in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20. If you want to read that, it'd be great to hear.
Yeah. So 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20 says, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors. And here's my favorite part. As if God is making his appeal through us.
Wow.
So good.
That is so good. And I know we want to discuss it, but hold on, we're going to discuss it, because I want to go now to co-host Johanna. She shares her thoughts about 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20 from the Good Word.
The Apostle Paul spent a lot of his adult life killing Christians. He hated Christians. And then he had a radical conversion where Jesus met him on a road, and he was never the same after. He became a Christian, a follower of Jesus. And then he became a representative for the church, for Jesus, all over the Roman world. It says in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20, as Paul is writing to the church in Corinth at the time, this is a letter he wrote, and he says, We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. So we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. So Paul, he's naming himself as an ambassador for God. And it's amazing that he would be able to say this, because it wasn't that long before that he was actually murdering the people of God. He was going out of his way to kill them. And yet he became an ambassador for Christ. That's the amazing gospel grace that Jesus brings to us. He takes our life from wherever it is, and then he makes us ambassadors of his good news, actually the best news, to the whole world. And so he encourages us not to just be ambassadors and representatives of him, but with a message. It's a message from the King, not ourselves. And so we can go with confidence and declare that Jesus, his love, his redemption is available to everyone, and he actually wants us to be reconciled to God. It's actually that we need to be reconciled to God. God has done everything on his side to make a way for us. He gave his own son, Jesus, on our behalf. And so it's not so much that we have to make a reconciliation or do the work of it, but we actually just have to accept the reconciliation that has already been offered to us. And so if you haven't yet accepted the reconciliation of God for you, just like Paul, who was met by Jesus as a murderer and hater of Christians, you too can reconcile yourself to God today. That's the best news in the world, isn't it?
Thanks, Johanna. Such great thoughts. Now let's hear our thoughts. What are your thoughts on 2 Corinthians 5:20 and what it means to be a godly disruptor? Dani?
Well, I think about, being an ambassador for Christ. Is there anything more incredible than the fact that we get to completely represent him to others here on earth? I mean, his fullness and all that he is, all that he does. I mean, you think of the authority that comes with that. And we get to go out and God makes his appeal to the world through us.
Yeah.
And I mean, there isn't much that I can think of that's more important than helping stop people who are heading to an eternity of being separated from him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Brooke, what do you
Yeah, I feel like we get to be the hands and feet of Jesus here on earth, and that's a huge responsibility. It feels like a great command, like go out and be ambassadors for me.
Yeah.
And like as Christians, that is something that we are held responsible to. And I think about myself personally. I don't often go out and hey, Jesus loves you, can I pray for you today, to a stranger. Like I struggle with that. But what I do love to do is show people God's love with the way I love them, whether that be subtly or big. And I think that that's important for people to know, that it doesn't always mean knocking on your neighbor's door, although it can. But if that's not your personality or you're not there yet, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just keep loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Lisa?
For me, like the concept of ambassador, it's a huge responsibility, absolutely. And when you think about it on the global level, like it's a political term often used. The ambassador of a certain country knows everything about their government, the policy, how they're going to represent it in the target country. And you get this weightiness of it. And they also, number one, they know who they're representing. They know it very well, but they submit themselves to the will of the state or the sovereignty as they represent in that particular country. And that's where I love that phrase, I am second, which ties into your ministry, where it's like there's God and I'm serving, I'm obedient, I'm submissive to his will on this earth as his ambassador. It's a weighty responsibility.
It is weighty. I actually felt it, because when you said, and he uses us like to appeal, like, to the world. So you kind of have a moment, like an awe moment, like, oh, that's big. And he's entrusted that to me. So that means he's got some good faith in me, even if I don't have it for myself. Like I actually have a moment where God himself said, hey, Melinda, you're going to be my ambassador. So now go out and represent me well. And it's like, wow. But then you're like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Even in my
It's a
own
privilege.
frailty
privilege.
and mess, that's what he says.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, though we're so far from perfect. I don't know about you guys.
I love it.
Well,
Yeah.
so far from perfect, but he still uses us. What is?
What's interesting to me, I love where Lisa was going with that. I'm going to ride that train for a minute. An ambassador, what's really cool is if they got into a car accident or anything happened to them while they were in that car, their ambassador car, it's that sovereign state.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So you could be driving beside Italy and then driving beside Russia just in their own car. That speaks to me because using that verse as a backdrop, that Christ is appealing through me. So wherever I am, God is.
Yeah, that's so good.
Wherever I am in the presence, in the sovereignty of God. I carry that sovereignty with me.
Yeah.
And that empowers us. We're not alone in that.
When you say that, automatically we sit up higher and stronger. Like all of a sudden you're like, okay.
The dignity of the
Yeah,
office,
and
the dignity.
I carry it with me.
That message needs to be just like screamed from the hilltops, because I think if people realize that, then we're not walking around all defeated and down about who we are. I think when people get that, they're like, wow, me, right? Safe and secure, an ambassador for God.
Yeah, and we're all broken and we're in need of a savior. And
Yeah.
if we can be the facilitators of that, like, amen.
Yeah. We carry the full weight of the kingdom.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Love that.
It's good.
Great thoughts, I mean, I love that. I think there's going to be lots in our blogs and vlogs as we continue the conversation online as well. Thanks for your thoughts, everyone. Fantastic and so encouraging, empowering for us today. Well, now let's go to our Ask the Expert segment with registered psychotherapist and counselor Lindsay Thompson, as she gives us some advice on how to cultivate strong relationships that form trust as we navigate sharing Jesus through our lives and to others.
We all want to be in relationships with people where we can say without a doubt, I trust you. This can be really hard in a world that is so broken and full of pain. As a therapist, I work daily with people who have been terribly hurt and being terribly hurtful, and so have no reason to ever really feel like they can trust or be trusted again. But daily, I also see people heal from their hurts and create healthy relationships full of trust. So, how do we make these relationships happen? In childhood, we learn to trust when we feel safe. As a baby, safety is felt through having our basic needs met consistently. Needs like being fed, changed, and soothed. This happens between a baby and his or her primary caregiver, the most important relationship in that baby's life. As we grow up, feeling safe no longer happens when our diaper is changed. Feeling safe happens when we know we are unconditionally accepted by the important people in our lives, just as we are, flaws and all. From the teenage years right into adulthood, we learn how to trust and be trusted when we consistently feel safe and accepted. But in our fallen world, this can't ever happen perfectly. We let down and are let down. But with understanding, commitment, time, and consistency, beginning with ourselves, we can rebuild a sense of safety in our most significant relationships and nurture trust back to life. So as you look at your most important relationships and think about how you can increase trust, ask yourself, do I talk to and treat people in ways that make them feel unconditionally accepted? What tangible things can I do to renew a sense of safety and acceptance in my relationships? And even when I'm having a bad day, do the important people in my life still have a sense that I accept them consistently, regardless of my mood? These can be really hard questions to ask yourself, but you're not alone. Ask God to graciously point out the significant people who need to feel increased safety and acceptance with you. This is a tangible first step to bringing real trust back.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for that good advice that we need to love people unconditionally to create trust and safety. Well, it's been a full show, and Dani, we so appreciated you being here and your thoughts. And as we move into our takeaway time, do you have one takeaway for us and for our viewers and listeners to take away from the show?
I think the key to a joy-filled and powerful life is to take full responsibility for being Christ's ambassador in this world. I think that unlocks the key to so many good things.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that, you guys?
Weepy. My life is full because I was obedient and because I said yes. And I think that we miss out on so much by just being Christ's hands. You don't know whose life you're going to change, and the lives that are connected to that life. I'm so thankful that someone did that for me.
Yeah.
I think of this verse actually in Psalms. It says, may I never look back on my life and wish that I'd served you more. And I just think of that, like, may I never look back on my life and wish that I had represented Christ better. Just as like an encouragement to like, do your best now. Like when you walk into anywhere, when you post on anything, like, you are representing Christ. It's really important.
For me, that thought of just taking responsibility sometimes could be such a burden for somebody. So what does it mean? What do I have to do? Do I have to be perfect? And that's where the grace comes in, and knowing that the sovereign state of God's kingdom is behind you. He will be the one that allows you and enables you, equips you to be that ambassador, because that's the promise of the Holy Spirit in us.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think you took my takeaway. My second takeaway was from 2 Corinthians 5:20 that we are God's ambassadors. We represent him wherever we go, and we do this within our relationships and connections around us. But maybe we can do like a second part, because I think as we've been talking, when you realize the truth of that, that should make you, I mean, honestly, sit up higher and stronger, feel empowered and strong. And yet, I think there's a part where you're just like, wow, me. So there's a sense of awe and wonder and excitement all in that, right? That we are God's ambassadors.
You know, I hear this over and over while you're talking. We didn't get saved by Christ's love to get stuck.
That's right.
God has called us, he saved us to move. He saved us to save others, to bring the love of God. And I think this is a challenge to not just us in this room, but to the church. We sit at the table and we feed off of the word, and we get really overweight. But God's calling us to get up and share that same love that changed our lives.
You know, Sarah, I love that, because Danny, when you talked earlier, like, mamas, don't give up on your kids. Because here's the thing. Somebody threw an Outreach magazine or whatever in the back of a car. For whatever reason. Whoever gave that person this little, you know, what is it, a track or something?
No, it was a book.
It was a book, throws it in the back or puts it in the back, and then you steal that car with that book in it where you read it. Come on, that's got to be God. Like, that's no chance, right? And so when I go and speak, you know, at women's conferences, I always tell mothers, pray, because it might not be you getting your kid back in. It could be a whole bunch of other people and things that will bring them back. So you pray, God, use anything, anybody to bring my child home. And I've had so many women respond like, yes, because they've always thought it's them, right? And they will love unconditionally, but sometimes I'm like, you know, God will use a book in the back of a stolen car.
That's right.
Like, how insane is that?
Yeah, and you know, if you think about it, the gospel has woven its way all throughout, you know, the entire Old Testament, through the New Testament, time of Jesus, the early church, the disciples, all the way 2,000 years later to us. Why should it stop with us? Right? If it found its way all the way to you, like, who do you know that you can share it with?
And it makes sense that has motivated you to go to unreached, you know, countries and people groups to share Jesus. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what takes us on the border of, you know, South Sudan, or to an underground church in Asia, or into the Amazon jungle, or places like that. We'll go anywhere to bring the gospel to those who haven't yet heard.
Praise God.
Wow, that's so amazing. So I guess the lesson is, throw some great, you know, good gospel books in the back of your car just in case it gets stolen. I don't know.
That's my takeaway.
Is that your takeaway? That's your takeaway.
That's my new takeaway.
Throw those books in the back of the car. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, Brooke, Lisa, for your thoughts. Thank you for being godly disruptors in your own place and in your own lane and where God has put you. So thank you so much for your lives. And Dani, thank you so much for being here. And why don't you close the show with your takeaway for us?
You know, if we would let God disrupt us to be disruptors, I think we would just see him moving in all the different people around us, because we all know people that are far from God. And you're going to find that if you start going out there and sharing with others, that God has gone ahead of you and he's prepared people for you.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you. And to our viewers, to read our blogs and devotionals on being a godly disruptor and how to do that, go to seeherlove.com. You can also watch our vlogs on being a godly disruptor. We want to equip you and give you the courage to go out there and disrupt and change lives and give people that sense of confidence that they are ambassadors. And remember, always know, as you head out into the world as God's ambassador, you are seen, you are heard, and you are deeply loved by God. Bye-bye.